Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getItinwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
Welcome to Insights in Sound live from the NAMM show floor. My guests today are KC Mancebo and Lenise Bent. And
hi, everybody.
Hello,
Thanks
folks.
for coming.
Thanks for coming out.
Good to see you all.
And we are talking about career paths, which are, of course, never what you think they're going to be. Has anybody in your knowledge actually known by the age of 14 or 15 what they're going to do and actually done that? Do we know anybody like that?
Only musicians.
I knew some, but they were musicians, and they were in bands, and yeah. But
it's
I think
pretty
that
rare.
I don't know how common that is, but I do know people.
But point being that most career paths tend to be very circumlocucious, shall we say?
Circumlocucious. I can say that.
SAT words coming out.
It's a big word.
That is.
In
It's a
Scrabble, it
mouthful.
scores a lot of points.
Yeah.
But you guys in particular have, well, I guess all of us, but we've had very non-traditional trajectories, right?
Yes.
Casey, let's start with
Yes.
you a little bit. You've done all sorts of strange and interesting things.
I think that's a good way to describe it.
That's how I describe you. I don't. When people say, "Well, so what does Casey do?" And
She's
I
very
say,
strange
she
and
does
interesting.
all sorts of stuff. Strange.
Yeah.
My,
Good
my
stuff.
husband has a joke that it's just called KC.com. And so it is. I mean, I started, my 14-year-old self wanted to be a gerontological lawyer.
A what?
I wanted to help old people not get taken advantage of in nursing homes.
Well, so now you're in music business, so you are doing that
So that
anyway,
was
right?
straight.
Goal fulfilled.
But some traveling changed that, and I started an import-export company when I was young, but that was my second business. And I turned that into a career in fashion that led to a career in music.
You started an import-export. Now, how does that happen?
I went to, I think it was in Italy first, or Spain, I don't remember, and I just saw some things. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. This is not in America. And I went home and I figured out how to bring it to America, and I just learned on the fly, and then I started taking things from America and sending them to Europe.
So basically, self-motivated
Completely,
initiative
yeah.
kind of thing.
And then through that, I said, oh, well, there's things here that people don't want that exact thing, so I'm going to redesign that thing to be the thing that the people want. And then I became a designer. Not like Bob, but.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, how does this? I mean, first of all, how does this tie into a career in the music industry?
Well, it's a very funny little story. I had a very personal tragedy in my life that took me out of wanting to work that hard, that intensely, and traveling to Europe, etc. And I needed a break, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine called me and said, there's this guy, he bought a house from the developer I'm working for, and it's some like music fashion thing. You might want to go talk to him. That was the Spice Girls. So I got into music, thank you to the Spice Girls. And that then took me into working with Britney, Christina, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and I lived my beginning music life in the pop world.
Interesting.
Wow.
So
Nice.
really, it's the takeaway here is don't minimize the importance of any kind of connection or direction, no matter how obscure it may seem.
Absolutely, and I think one thing that's always helped me move forward in my career is just saying yes. Sure, I'll do it.
Even if you don't know what
Even
you're
if
doing,
I don't
right?
know what I'm doing, I figure it out.
That's the story of my life too. Yeah. Now, Lenise, you started out doing what you thought you wanted to do, and then kind of went a different direction too, right?
Well, I thought I wanted to get into television and film production.
Oh,
First.
so you
and
didn't even, okay.
yeah, I started out in the Screen Children's Guild when I was 8 years old.
All
Growing
right.
up in Los Angeles, Hollywood area. Well, I wasn't in Hollywood. I grew up in Compton, and that wasn't far from Hollywood. So one of the things that parents could do with their kids is, child labor, put them in to work in television and film. As
Did you have a Coogan account? I hope you got a Coogan account.
no, I don't. We were the bunch that they needed kids in the background. Cue the kids, and have us. They direct us as to whatever it was we were supposed to be doing, and rarely would they wouldn't give you a line or anything because then they'd have to pay you more. But but it was a lot of fun and got me into wanting. I love the technology on the set. I would hang out with the cameraman and the special effects people and all of that while they, like on a Western, they would drag the Indian down the street by the horse, and the padding would turn underneath his outfit, and I'd just go, whoa, that's so cool. And they'd say, okay, cue the kids, and I'd say, oh, nuts, I have to go work now, can I come back and watch? And they'd say, yeah, when you're done you can come back and watch. So I was totally into that, and my brother and I, we went into studying. Our high school had some film programs, so we got into that. But earlier in Compton, we were also in the Compton City Schools Festival Orchestra when we were 8, 9, 10, and 11 years old, and made records and performed. And I played flute, he played trumpet, and so that's where I got my musical chops, besides taking piano lessons and all. So, things were starting to work together. And then my older brother, worked at Jan's Electronics, which older people in the music business all remember that, in Compton on Rosecrans.
Oh, yeah.
And so he would bring stuff home. He was 13 years older than me. So when I was 3, I would just love being at his feet as he would bring an amplifier with tubes in it, and he'd fire it up, and the smell of vacuum tubes is still one of my most comforting
All right.
smells to me. And so the seeds were planted whether we knew it or not. And then as a teenager, moved to Torrance, and my boyfriend, at the age of started going steady at 12. He had a band already.
How scandalous!
I know. Well, that's when you hold hands and wear a St. Christopher, and you don't do. You maybe make out a little bit, but yeah, that was a big deal.
This
But
is a family show here, okay?
Yes, right. I know. I shall not digress any further. He was honorable, and he had a band, and they had played the Teenage Fair at the Hollywood Palladium at Easter. That used to be there, and you would see like Hendrix and the Chambers Brothers and Leon Russell and so many different people would perform there. And then his guitar player eventually started working for Leon Russell, and said, you need to come and see the studio. And I was such a fan of Leon Russell's, I said, well, I don't care about a studio, I just want to meet Leon Russell. So I went over after school one day, and Leon answered the door, and I met Roger in the studio. The dining room had been turned into, it was at Leon's house. He had turned it into one of the first home studios. And I heard all this great music, and I saw the Stevens 40-track tape machine and the console and the monitors, and I heard 21 tracks of background vocals for a song called Hideaway on the Will-o'-the-Wisp album. And I said, it was like the angels sang to me, and I had my epiphany. And I said, show me how to work this thing. I'd already started going to film school, so I dropped out of film school the next day, found a recording school.
Not impulsive or anything, were you?
Well, I just knew, the planets aligned and the angels rejoiced. And so it was very clear what I was supposed to do. And then I went home and told my parents. And fortunately, they were cool with it. Thank God, because I was going to do it anyway.
This points to exactly what I'm talking about, which is a willingness to shift direction, a curiosity. You know, my big thing is always stay curious, always want to learn, always want to gain a new experience.
All of that curiosity fuels your career path too, and you find different things because you're open to things coming to you. Fluidity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's kind of an air of, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. I'm not exactly sure where this is going to lead, but what the hell, right?
Well, I actually was pretty myopic about it once I realized that, whoa, this is how records are made, and people get paid to do this, and this is how it's done, and this is what people do, and oh my God. So it was like, whoa, this is like, heaven on earth to me. So it was mixing music with technology. So, both sides of the brain were getting squeezed in a really wonderful way.
Now, in your case, you did end up in the studio. You did end up becoming an engineer, working as an engineer, and then life circumstances changed, and you pivoted, did you not?
Oh, I did a major 360. Well, I got talking about imbalance and working too much and not taking care of yourself, and because there were many opportunities to be abusive to yourself in the music business back then, and a lot of people took advantage of those, and so working 20-hour days, eating Roscoe's chicken and waffles in one hand and mixing in the other, and a little too much champagne and a little too much, not taking care of yourself, and so I got cancer, and the doctor said, quit your job or die, and by that point I was really delighted and ready to. I had burnout. I had done like 20 records in 2 years with a maniac. He'll say it. Mike Chapman was a great engineer, a great producer of Blondie and The Knack and Suzi Quatro and Sweet and Mud, and songwriter, and worked on a lot of great records. Cher's rock record, Tanya Tucker's rock record, Well Kept Secrets.
Total workaholic, though.
Yeah, but you'd finish a record on Saturday and start rehearsals for another one on Monday, and I just burned out, and it was too much, and how do I get out of this? So I got sick, and so the doctor said, quit your job or die, and I did, and I quit, and and then did a variety of things. Fortunately, I was in a situation where I was afforded the opportunities to live in various places and travel I had a relationship at the time, which was, so I got to be a girlfriend, and that was fun, and I lived in the Caribbean and for a while and did sailboat deliveries, had that life for about 8 years. I got well in 8 years, and then came back to work and went into post-production because I knew going back to the music business was just, that's what got me messed up in the first place.
Now, was this a conscious decision to go into post, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I was so burned out on the music business, I didn't care if I ever worked in it again at that time.
But were you familiar with what was involved in working in post? I mean, it's kind of a different world.
It's a very different world. Well, not really, except that so many people in that time I was away who had been in the music business, the bottom had fallen out of it, no more budgets. And so many of my colleagues had gone from the music business into post, so they said, hey, you should be doing this. And I was going, no, but because, the music business was so much more,
Glamorous?
Glamorous, yeah, right, and sitting in a room by yourself making noises. But I learned to appreciate that, and I got a great gig with one of my colleagues. She used to work with Fleetwood Mac and had gone into working for Disney cartoons and doing foreign music and effects tracks. So she got me in on this gig. My first post gig was working on the entire Disney cartoon catalog, taking out any dialogue and replacing it so they had music and effects on it, and then they could sell it all around the world and dub it in any, Mickey could be in German and French and Portuguese and Chinese.
That's always interesting, yeah.
So that was a really fun, creative way to get into it, but I had to start at the bottom after being this big muckety-muck engineer. Well, the Post people would say, you may have been something in the music business, but here you're nothing.
All right.
And you go,
So it's a really encouraging environment.
Yeah, and I go, okay.
That's a
all right.
supportive work environment. All right.
Yeah, and the first shift was from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. I did that
Piece
for
of
like
cake.
3 months, and let me tell you, that's a toughie.
Now, Casey, I want to talk about the way you sort of came around the back end and started doing promotional stuff, and then ended up basically in the music industry, almost backed in, so to speak, right?
I did. When I got out of pop, and I really decided that I really saw the toxicity of what was going on in the record industry with teenage girls. You may hear about that a little bit these days, but back then it was very much under the rug, and it was very hard emotionally, and I wanted to be somewhere more productive, and so I decided to go and work in children's music. And I had a lot of retail relationships from working on music and doing all of these campaigns for these artists, and I channeled that into doing worldwide distribution of children's music and built a record label, and that's really where I launched into being very submerged into music in a different way. And from there I started booking talent and booking stages and creating festivals, and then producing festivals, and then managing artists in different genres, and working with a lot of artists who had crossover careers, and a lot of artists who I thought should make kids albums, and I would approach them and say, you should really make an album for kids. And that's been really such a beautiful, passionate journey, that part of my career.
And you really, you could not have possibly foreseen this.
Not at all. It came out of nowhere, and I got the first client I had wasn't even a music project, it was a video, and it was a pediatrician, and very, very famous pediatrician who knew I had a relationship with Target and said, can you help me get something into Target? And I said, sure, and it just snowballed.
For me, I think one of the most valuable assets of any career path is being able to sort of thin slice all of your abilities and really apply them all, even things that you don't necessarily think will have anything at all to do with what your career is.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that in the management portion of what I do in my career, that slicing up everything and putting stuff together for artists is a real benefit. And a lot of other managers are very skilled and have wonderful assets and are fantastic, but I come from a different place where I know manufacturing, and I've been in manufacturing for years, and I have the design element, and I have the retail element. So I have a lot of things from my background that I can bring into the artists right now, which is really helpful. Merch. And that is how artists make money these days.
That's right.
Yeah.
These days.
And it's really interesting to see how, it used to be that you toured to support the album, and then you made the album to support the tour.
Yeah.
And now it's just you make the merch to sell on tour to support your life.
That's right.
Yeah. Were there things that you were doing that you thought, why the hell am I doing this? And then
Every
later
day.
on you go, oh,
I still have
man,
that every
yeah.
day. I'm like, why am I taking this meeting right now? And then 2 years later, I'm producing a movie with someone, and I went, oh, right, that happened.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
That I think has been one of the biggest common threads that I've seen throughout most people's multifaceted careers. Is you think, what the hell does this have to do with what I do? And then, and I'm sure that especially with you with, editing music, and all of a sudden you're editing dialogue.
Or
it's
doing Foley sound effects.
There you go.
Or what was a funny thing I got a gig working for a kids' TV show called Dumbo Circus. It was on the Disney Channel. It was geared for 3 to 8-year-olds, and so it had these characters in these radio-controlled heads that were. They shot the show on a green screen set down the street, but in the recording studio, we recorded the dialogue in 2 days with the very top voiceover actors in the industry were on Dumbo Circus, and the Dumbo Circus band was also some of the A-list top session players. So they would do we'd do 2 days of recording music and 2 days of dialogue, and I knew a lot of the musicians from the music business days, and I went, "Whoa, you're doing Dumbo Circus too? Yeah!" And
Old homecoming
and that was
week.
fantastic.
That's so
Yeah, and it just
Disney stories.
yeah, one thing led to another, and just a lot of opportunities just came from showing up at places you didn't think you were going to go to
There
or
you
didn't
go.
want to go to. My biggest example of that, if I can share this story, which I tell students and in workshops, had gotten invited to go to a friend of mine who used to produce Nancy Matter. She was a producer for Disney Kids Records.
I know who she is.
Yeah, and so she decided to go into mastering. And so she opened up a mastering studio, and I went, oh, okay. And so she was having her studio opening party the Sunday after Thanksgiving that I spent with my kids and had a rollerblading accident, and my leg was all screwed up. And I went, oh, God, I don't want to drive all the way to Burbank to do this, but I want to support my friend and her new little business. And so I drug my leg in my car and drove there, and I walk in, and her partner was a very successful mastering engineer. It was a beautiful facility, and after I guess it was about 15 years of not doing music, I walk in, and there's people there from the music business, and going, well, Lenise, but there was this one woman who had worked with Disney, and I walked in, and she goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I used to be in the music business, because she knew me from Dumbo Circus and other Disney things. And she goes, whoa, can you read a score? And I said, yeah, because guess what? I was in the Compton City Schools Festival Orchestra and learned how to read a score when I was 8. And
Support music education, people.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Start early.
And then she goes, whoa, well, can you be in Tel Aviv in 3 weeks? And I went, sure, why? And she goes, well, I'm not with Disney anymore. I'm with DreamWorks, and we have a movie, The Road to El Dorado, and we need somebody to work with the musical director to produce the foreign vocals with the star talent around the world for these shows, because the foreign dubbing world, especially with kids shows, kids can't read subtitles. So they all have to be dubbed in 70 different languages. So there are people who do this all, independent contractors, but it's the dream job. So I said, sure, I can do that. And so that happened, and I worked for DreamWorks as a foreign dubbing supervisor. They sent me all over the place for Shrek 2, Spirit, and working with star talent around the world, because I went to that party. But also at that party, Jane Scobie, who had ran Royal Tone Studios, came up and said, oh, Lenise, good to see you here. Are you back in the music business? And I said, yeah. And she goes, well, I run this studio, and I want to give you some studio time to check it out. And I said, well, thanks. Okay. And then a few minutes later, this band comes up of these young kids named Olio, and they said, are you Lenise Bent? Did you work on Blondie? And I went, yeah. I hadn't seen anybody in the music business for all these years, and I would go to this one party, and they said, "Oh wow, well, we'd love you to do some 4 songs for us, and we have a budget." And I said, "Well, cool. I have studio time," and that all came from going to a party I almost didn't go to. So whenever I get invited to something and I'm going, "Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, I remember that, and I put on my party clothes and I go."
Well, there's something else there too, though, which is I'm going to go back to what Casey said earlier. Always saying yes.
Yes.
And now I don't know. In your case, you already had a pretty well developed skill set. Maybe you were telling the truth. Lots of times when I say yes, somebody says, "Do you know how to do something?" Say, "Yeah," and then I go run figure it out. I take the gig and then I figure it out because there's nothing that you can't learn.
Exactly. Well, they said, "Well, if you're going to do the music, you might as well do the dialogue too." And I went, "Okay." And I never supervised dialogue, and they
figured
had
it out.
Like
Just
for
figured it
yeah
out,
for
right?
Yeah.
I got to do Shrek in Rio for a month and recording 30 voiceover actors, overseeing the recording and producing and all of that. I'd never done that before, but
It sounds like a show, Shrek in Rio.
Shrek in Rio.
Shrek on ice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
I think there is Shrek on Ice.
There
I
probably
think
is.
there is
so-
Shrek on Ice. Yeah.
in Rio.
Cool.
Mhm. And KC, for you also, I mean, you've kind of said yes to a whole lot of stuff you really didn't know how to do, haven't you?
Absolutely, and I figured it out, and I don't think I failed at anything terribly yet. They keep calling, so I think that's good for me. But a lot of very interesting opportunities that, like, I launched K-pop in the States, so that was really something I just went, I'll figure it out, because that was not a market I knew at all. And
Wow. That's bold.
that first year we had 2,500 attendees, and by year 5 we had 185,000.
Wow.
So I figured that out real quick.
That's several stadiums worth.
Yeah. Man.
I'm big in Korea.
Oh.
And I think if you go in and you're transparent about what you know and you don't know, people trust that, and that makes people feel very comfortable. So if you go in just with all the confidence, but knowing that there is a learning curve with everything, especially in production, is like you plan and then you adapt. There's nothing that's ever going to go live or in the studio the way that you intend it to. So if you can course correct, that's the key to it.
And I have to say, that was such a surprise for me to discover that, was that when you did say yes to something and you didn't know everything about it, or you say, yeah, I'm sure I can figure it out. I haven't really done it before, but I've watched it or whatever, and you'd get so much support from everybody saying, "Oh, no problem. This is how you do this and this and this, and if you have any questions, here, I'll talk to this person. They'll talk you through it." And it was like there was so much support to get you to where they were, to be good at that thing that they wanted you to do, because apparently I guess they figure you can do it if you eventually. They didn't need you to know how to do it completely. In fact, maybe they wanted you to learn it their way as opposed to somebody else's way, so they didn't want you to be, I don't know, but I marveled at that.
I think a lot of times the people know how you work and how you are as, like for Lenise or for myself, as a producer and as someone who can execute. And they trust that, and they know that you can do your job and that you have a good intention and you're loyal and you have integrity. And they know anybody can figure out X of whatever the job is.
Yes.
But that's what they're hiring you for.
Well, there's a one of the most common fears that I hear from a lot of people, and we've all experienced it too, is imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is huge among those of us who are self-taught, because we're learning in a vacuum. But I recently heard a really, really great sort of flipping the script concept on that, which is that imposter syndrome, the mindset is, I have no idea what I'm doing, and soon I'm going to get busted. Somebody's going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. Whereas if you flip that script and say, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. It's a completely different mindset. It's empowering.
I think because of that, like I've never had imposter syndrome because I just know I'm going to figure it out. And that's the curiosity, back to that curiosity. And
you're very fortunate.
I know.
Well,
I thank my mother for that. I mean, she was always like, just go and have that. You know, it's that sense of being an entrepreneur too, is that you just have to problem solve.
Well, and I know I've been asked about that before, and I said, well, not really, because the nature of what we do is the main thing about it is we're constantly learning new things and new technology and all of that. So there's a whole lot of stuff I know I don't know. It's okay, because I will learn the stuff that I need to know to do that thing I've been asked to do now, and we're all in that boat. So that's kind of, it's not a finite and linear thing at all. So somebody said, well, what about engineering? Don't you ever wonder about what, feeling bad about the stuff you don't know? And I said, no.
All the time. Well, but you know that you're going to learn it.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
It's not rocket science, It's a little, you have to, it's not so much, fortunately, in what we do is the technical side of it. It's more about people skills and team
Absolutely.
playing and being the community and human element, and depending on others and working with others, and getting that baby bathed whatever best way you can. It doesn't mean you know everything, and nobody knows everything, and anybody who says they do, they don't know anything.
It usually sort of works inversely. The younger you are, the more you think you know.
Oh God, yeah.
A lot of younger students I meet, they're almost embarrassed to admit that they don't know something. And it's like, no, man, the sooner you admit that you don't know it and start to learn it, the faster you're going to advance.
Well, and the more support you'll get from other people to show you, because the worst thing, and I tell this to students, as you know, is to say that you know how to do something that you don't know how to do when you're in the studio, because then they've lost trust in you. If you say,
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
And I say, be authentic. Never say you can do something, because they will think in a session or whatever that, yeah, you can, and if you screw it up, then that's it for you. You've lost your credibility. But if you say, I really don't know that, but I can learn it, or can you show me something, people will come out to support that. And they will still have your trust. And nobody expects a young person to know everything right out of school. And the first thing I think anybody learns once they get out of school and get that job is, oh my God, there's so much I don't know. And it's okay. Nobody expects them to do that.
So for each of you, I think the common thread here is I just took a chance, right? And things started happening, and maybe I had no idea what the hell I was getting myself into. I mean, that, for me, it's like, that's probably the name of my autobiography,
I like it. It's all like risk reward, and I look at life and a lot of my business decisions that way. Is this a good way to invest my money, or invest my time, or my relationships? And what are we building, and what will happen with that? And what if something bad happens? So, I mean, there's a lot of evaluation that I do all the time, so that I can continue to learn and evaluate and have the curiosity, while knowing I am going to take some risks. I'm not, that adventuresome. I'm not a bungee jumper, no. But I do like, it's exciting to have the risk and the challenges.
Yeah, and
pushes you.
And it continues. It never ends if you're, conscious and aware of that.
Thanks for qualifying that.
Yeah. Well, some people think, okay, that's it. I'm doing this job, and this is all it entails, and I will just do this every day. And there's nothing assembly line about the creative process. The content creating and development and entrepreneurship and all these things are really wonderfully creative, and we're learning all the time, and it never stops. And you've changed hats so many times just since I've known
Dear
you
God.
in the past few years,
About
all
20
doing
different
well
careers
in all
already.
of them. But and same with you, and stuff comes up for me that, wow, I never did that. Wow, okay, you know, um, all the time, and I'm so fortunate. Well, I think it's being open to that, allowing those, being, having your radar out for opportunities that would be something fun to do you've never done.
I like to say I'm a lead actor in short attention span theater, because I'm constantly like, oh, that was cool. Now I know how to do that. Now I want to find something else. Yeah, you could say that I'm just, I'm inattentive or whatever, but I feel like it's a constant learning process, and the more new things you're willing to take a chance on, the more opportunities arise.
And you get to have more experiences and share more knowledge with other people, and build something that's really, an amazing life, and create memories. And I think that's one of the most rewarding parts for me, is especially in live production, is you look out in the sea of the audience at the festival and you're like, I'm making all their memories. That's really cool.
Yep.
And you learn how to do that well. And in the studio, you're doing the same thing. It's like you're creating the soundtrack of people's lives.
That's right.
It's like I'm sure how many people have been so impacted by your work you don't even know.
Well, and it always just touches me so much when somebody comes up and tells me how, this record helped them get through this, or boy, the Blondie record. Or I even had one person say, and a panel, and he was an engineer, and he said, I want to thank you for your work on the Asia album, Steely Dan. That was the first record he goes, I lost my virginity to that record.
All right.
Can I thank you for that also, Lenise, personally? Because that album is just magical.
Well, I didn't lose my virginity
Like
to it, but I like it. But I want to zoom out and talk about the other aspect of that I think is one of the most rewarding aspects of not just career but life in general, which is the connective tissue between us all. The fact that, I walk through a NAMM show, and if I don't know somebody, there's probably 6 degrees of separation between me and them somehow or another. And I think that is one of the most...
Two or three.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But I think that's one of the most rewarding things about it, to know that if I don't know somebody who knows something, they do. And it's just so, to me, such a wonderful thing to be able to say, this vast network of people with whom we become not just work colleagues, but mentors, mentees, friends, more than anything else. We have become much more than work colleagues and business colleagues. We're friends, and
absolutely.
And
you don't get that in a lot of other industries.
No, you really don't. But I think that's what builds a quote unquote career, because my career and my life, even though yes, it's important to have work-life balance, no question about it, but I don't know what I would be doing if I wasn't in this industry. This is, this has been my life.
Every time I think I'm going to get out, it's like the mafia. You can't get out. You just can't.
I was sure I wasn't going to do this anymore. So because I had so many friends from around the world and traveling around, I took a course in international tour management.
All right.
To be an international tour guide, because I had traveled a bit, as David knows, and so I thought this would be perfect. That I really want to do it, and I every time I went for a gig, because I graduated just as I didn't graduate at first because I got I think the DreamWorks gig, and every time I would try to go back to that, I would get another fabulous gig that would keep me going in the music business, and it just cracked me up.
That's what kept me from graduating college. I'm a college dropout because I kept getting work.
Right.
And it was like, okay, this is real world experience, and Yeah, I still don't have that degree, but I think I kind of know stuff.
It's like not all that it's cracked up to be for every career, and
Right.
the world has changed obviously now
Sure.
too. That I think the college experience for children is a completely different thing, and
It's socialization
it's
too, in a sense.
well, that's very true. That's
Yeah.
very true. But what they can do with that piece of paper versus what they can do now on their own is like they're
Sure.
more empowered in different
Yeah.
ways too.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Absolutely. There's more options to learn something that you can actually monetize and do for a living, and that you're happy about, and maybe college isn't the right thing. I've always had a kind of a burr in my paw about how the recording industry, they opened up all of these recording programs in all of these universities because it would attract students, but where are the jobs for them? Why? And that, for the longest time, I couldn't justify even teaching at one of those because, or being a guest speaker and all, because I thought this isn't right. You're making them think they can have this career. But then I thought, if there's anybody in that class that was like me, that was so driven, it was like, I don't need you to tell me no, I need you to tell me how. And
That's good.
so I said, for that, any of those people, if any of that is in these classes, that's who I'm talking to. And so that's what I do that for.
I work with a lot of charities and a lot of nonprofits, as you guys know, and in music education and other outlets. But one of the organizations that I've done work with is Music Forward Foundation, which is House of Blues Foundation. What I love about what they do is they get students together and they bring in a lot of professionals who are in tour management, who are in business management, who are front of house people, back of house people, and they show the students all these different opportunities in the music industry. And I think that definitely needs to be
Well, that's
improved.
very real. See, that is such a
Yeah.
practical approach to that, because there's mentorship and there's communication. There's people who are doing it, and they're creating those relationships, and that's the ideal way to. It's what I always say. They say it's not what you know, it's who you know, but it's also who knows you. And so I encourage students to go with, Grammy U and show up and go to these things and really try to get them to
The
participate.
NAMM show.
Yeah, the NAMM show.
And I also think it's really helpful if people who are in our industry and other industries do take the time to put themselves out there for the next generation, even if it's you're mentoring someone for 2 weeks, if short periods of time. There's so many kids out there that need the support.
Oh yeah.
And there are great mentoring opportunities. Everything from, as you say, a lot of the organizations you work with. AES has
fantastic.
a mentoring thing. I mean, there are so many possibilities, and that works both ways. I mean, I've mentored students through AES, and I've learned more from them.
Yes.
And,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And that's the
through
fun part.
teaching and everything else.
And
I
you're
mean, I've
building new
learned.
relationships too. And I've met some incredible mentees who I still
Yeah.
keep in touch with, and former assistants of mine and people like that. And you watch them grow. It's really rewarding.
The first night, Thursday night of NAMM, I spent the evening all with former students of mine. We had a table together, and they just kind of came out of the woodwork, and it was so much fun. I used to teach at SAE, School of Audio Engineering in Los Angeles, just an adjunct instructor, 3 classes, but for over 8 years. But I see so many of my former students here at NAMM coming up and saying, "Oh, I work for Focus right now," or "Oh, I'm in post-production," or "Oh, I'm doing this, and thank you for, it's what I learned in your class," because my goal as a teacher was that this is very selfish of me. I'm teaching you so you can work for me. So if I see you in
Yep.
the studio, I know you have my back. So that's what I'm doing. So listen up, and it was a very practical, real way of teaching, and it's worked. Thank God. I'm just so proud of those students.
Any parting words, advice, anything like that?
I think, like I said earlier, please, anybody watching this, support music education, whether it's in your local schools or any way you can. If it's a charity you believe in, share music with the next generation and support it, because, as we all know, it's not in very many schools anymore, and we as professionals need to try to help as much as we can to keep that needle moving forward.
Amen.
And my advice is to be mindful of your health and your time and what really matters in life. Family is very important. All we have is our health and our time. And if we have our health but no time, that's not so good. If we have time and we're not healthy, that's not good. Get it balance and get your priorities right. It's the people in your lives. It's not the gear. And sometimes you have to turn down work because your daughter's doing a dance recital. That is going to matter more than anything else, and you'll get another gig.
Relationships. As we said, relationships are so important on every level.
Absolutely. That matters, and that becomes more apparent. All of us are, I'm not seeing any newbies out there. We're all,
Vintage.
I wouldn't even say vintage. It's just that we're experienced enough in life to more and more that becomes apparent, don't you think? Whether you're a parent or not.
Oh, that was
bad.
Did you go there? Did you really go there?
I did.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes. On that note, KC Mancebo, Lenise Bent, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Daniel, for having us.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for
Thank you, everybody out there for being here.
Everybody out there for
Appreciate
watching.
it.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.